Okay, the mixer, when you turn it on, should come up into a normal state with your main array turned on, and this is what the general setup of the room looks like. We've got some audience sound, which is not going out to the stereo bus, but the choir is, and that means that it's going out to the main speakers, and then all the other items are going out on this stereo bus here, which means that it's appearing right here on the mains. So next, we're going to talk about the submixes, not what's going into the room, but all the other feeds that we're sending out. So we go down to bus 1 through 8, and this is where our 5 submixes are. First one is narthex, and that includes the speakers right under the platform here under the balcony, and the cry room, and the entryway narthex speakers. Each of those has its own volume control on the wall, so you can adjust them individually, but the overall level just sits right here, and we've adjusted it so that that works pretty well now. So I'm going to select narthex and then hit sends on faders. So these faders over here show me what we're sending out. So currently sending out to the narthex, the pastor's belt packs here, the podium mic, and then that really shouldn't be up that high. These are the baptistry and other input, AM input that we don't know exactly what they are. And the soloist mic, and actually that can come up a little bit more for the narthex. It's not up real high, so I'm going to bring it up a little. These two channels are not being used at all. And then we're sending some choir out there. We're also sending out, some auxiliary that we're not using right now. That's a future use. But also, these two audience mics are the congregational mics that are up on the wall in the sanctuary, so that when you're out in the room, you can hear the sanctuary people singing or doing a responsive reading or anything like that. So these are included in that feed. The next mix is loopback. And so I'll hit loopback, make sure it sends on fader is on, so I know what we're sending from these channels to, these are like your monitor sub mix knobs here, the send knobs. And so we're sending out to the loopback in-ear system. The pastor's voice is up really high. Again, we don't need these unused ones up very high. The soloists, we're giving just a little bit of signal out there. These two inputs, again, are up full for now, but we don't use them yet. But if we ever bring in CD music or audio from a PC, they'll come in on these two, and that's where we will adjust their send to that. And then we're sending a little bit of the choir, and really almost none of the audience sound from in the room, because they're already in the room, the loopback people, and we don't want to muddy their in-ear monitoring. So just a little bit there so they don't feel totally isolated from everybody else. And then if we go to auxiliary, aux in, we also have the inputs from the 1/8 inch jack that's sitting over here on the table in case anybody's playing back music on that. Okay, the next mix is the stream. This is probably the most important one, and you want to listen to this, so I would always solo this and be listening to this in the headset whenever mixing up here as much as possible, because that's the one that's going to be the most difficult. People in the room, they're not really dependent on the mix to hear something. They can always hear something in the room, but people at home are totally dependent on what goes through this channel, and so this is really essential to get this right. So we'll go back to 1 through 8. We're sending out the pastor's vocals a little bit hotter because at home on a TV speaker, it's more important to have those levels up really firm so that you hear them. And we've got the singer soloist up at 100% of whatever we're mixing her in the room. We go to the choir, and we don't have the choir mics on. Oh, that's my mistake. I want to bring these up. We should be sending out whatever amount of the choir mics we're using in the sanctuary. We want to send out home so they can hear that. And then we've got audience mics here too. So those are up at half level right now because they really want to hear the pastor directly more, but we still want them to hear some of the room, to hear the congregation responding and the singing, so they don't feel like they're just isolated. We want them to feel like they're in the congregation and it sounds and feels like being here at church. And then, of course, on the auxiliary input, if there's any music that we're playing back in the room, that also comes up on these two channels. Okay, and finally, CD record out. I'm not going to select the solo for that right now, but the CD record out goes to the CD player up in front, And that just gets everything at unity. So it gets the pastors. Right now these two are not being used, but I'm going to bring them up for CD record because if we ever do plug anything in, we'll want it to come through on those channels. And the soloist. And remember, these are percentages of what the real mix is. If I turn off sends on faders, we're just back to what the real level is. So right now we're sending 0% of these two dead channels out there, and we're sending a little bit of soloist out. If I go back to sends on faders for the selected bus 5 CD record out, I'll hit sends on faders and select that, and you see we're sending out 100%, but remember those two channels are muted in the main output, so we're sending out 100% of nothing right now, which is fine. That's what we want. We don't want these two because they're actually in red because they're most of the time they're not used at all. The soloist, we're sending 100% out, but you remember if I turn that off, the soloist level is down here for what we're actually doing. So we've only got a small amount of soloist added in right now. And that's because that microphone is just here to the side of where we're sitting, and it's going to make a lot of noise of anything that people up here are saying, whispering to each other, is going to be going out to the stream if that is up much. So you probably most of the time will ride that and keep it down here, and when the soloist comes, you'll bring it up 100% here, and then sends on faders, that's how much will be going out to the congregation. I leave that up just a little bit so that there's something there, but if I was mixing this myself, I would keep it down at 0 and only bring it up when the soloist sang. And then of course the next two inputs are muted, so they're not sending anything out, even if we go back to sends on faders and see here that, let me turn that off, so they're muted here on the main mix. If I go back to sends on faders, we could leave that up 100% and we'd be sending out 100% of nothing because, again, there's nothing here on this. Sends on faders shows us how much is going here. Turn that off and it shows us how much is actually in the main mix. This is the primary mix, and all these over here are submixes of that primary mix. They're percentages of that primary mix. That's how this whole thing is set up. So when you're mixing a service, you can leave that off most of the time and just adjust things here, accordingly. If Pastor Odenberger's talking, you leave his mic up and the other mic down. You can bring the podium mic down even while he's talking. If he goes to the podium, you bring that up, or someone else goes to the podium, you can bring that up, bring this down, or if it's Pastor Gillickson, that goes up. And you do that mix here, and it will be reflected in all these other mixes automatically according to the percentages, sends on faders, according to these percentages that we chose on these faders. So you probably, once you get these set about right, you probably never have to go in and adjust these again. You just turn off sends on faders and you run your mix right over here on this side using the first main channels and that auxiliary in for CD playback, which will probably eventually move to a different input, but for now, that was the easiest one to put it on. Okay, so that is the current arrangement of the board and how we do the submixes. Next thing is going to be using the Wi-Fi remote control on a tablet.